Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Crafting on Ilum. Today, we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to do a little bit of a book club type of video. I just recently finished reading Plagueis, the Plagueis novel, and of course, it's a Legends novel, but I was very interested to learn more about Plagueis the Wise. And with me today, I am going to have a guest on. His name is Robbie from Galactic Factotum, and I'm going to bring him in just a second here. But we're going to be discussing the book together. So, without further ado, let me welcome Robbie from Galactic Factotum.
Hi, hello. I am Robbie from Galactic Factotum.
Yes, and we are the bestest of friends for the past,
Next month will be 3 years.
3 years? Oh, why? I was gonna say 2.5. I didn't realize it had been 3 years.
Yeah, December 3rd. The weekends were different, but it was the 3rd or 4th, I think, of December, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. All right. So tell us first, before we get started, where we can find you and what your page is about, and a fun fact about yourself.
Back in elementary school. Stand up in front of the class.
Yeah.
Oops,
force you to tell yourself.
Well, I am mostly active on Instagram under Galactic Factotum, Galactic_Factotum. I'm trying to get more involved in threads because that's where all the cool kids are moving nowadays. But literally, everyone I know that I followed on Twitter or X or whatever, they're moving over. So it's oh, well, if they're not going to be there, then might as well go there. So I'm slowly building that up. I have a YouTube page, but I haven't done anything with it. So I wouldn't even consider it a platform yet because there's nothing on there. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me, is Instagram and threads, Galactic_Factotum.
And what do you do on your page?
I do a lot of photography. When I go to conventions, I take all the photos of my friends who do cosplay and everything. I take their photos. I do just regular photography as a hobby on the side. I do cosplay myself. I'm still consider it new because I'm not that I don't have a whole array of cosplayers. I have maybe 3, I guess. And I've only
more than most, I would say.
Yeah. And I started my page about 3 years ago, I think. So I guess a cosplay per year is pretty much what I have at this point.
It's a good rate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to do more cosplay. I do a lot of model building and prop building when I can, because they are time consuming. And me being me, when I build a prop, I like to find how it was originally made in every way possible and scour the internet, scour thrift shops or dumpster diving and go finding for the exact proper piece that I need. So that's usually a slower endeavor, is model building. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you do model building, photography, and cosplay.
Yes.
And also conventions, because that's where we met.
Yes. Conventions
at LA
are
Comic-Con.
LA Comic-Con 2022, right? Yeah.
Yes. 22. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. And do you have anything that you are working on currently that we can expect to see from your page?
I still have some photos to upload of my friends from this most recent LA Comic-Con. I honestly got to check in on them and say, because I don't know if it's I post my stuff first and then they start posting it, or if I have to wait for that. I don't know what I don't know what that entails or what you're supposed to do in that situation at all. So, and then I'm also working on cosplays, trying to work on cosplays. I've been trying to work on some Mandalorian cosplay for the last, I don't know how many months. I know what I need to do it. I know what it takes to do it. It's just a matter of just gathering all that stuff and putting it all together.
Yeah.
And I'm also currently working on a Star Trek cosplay.
Fancy.
I have always been a fan of Star Trek as much as I have been of Star Wars. Literally the difference between fantasy and sci-fi, because Star Trek is supposed to be our actual future and like what it could be, versus space wizards and all that other fun stuff, which I love.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that right now, and that one seems to be coming a lot faster than the Mandalorian one, because it's it's a simple shirt and then pants and then boots, and that's pretty much it. You're done. But me being me, it's like, no, it has to be a very specific color, it has to be a very specific style, very specific stitching, very specific everything. I'm not a seamstress, so I'm trying to like scour the internet for like, okay, what is like the best looking one, and then maybe I can just get it tailored or something. And so that's pretty much what I'm doing right now, because the next convention that I know of that I'm going to isn't until March, which is WonderCon in Anaheim.
So you still got time. Busy, but time.
Plenty. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Again, you can find Robbie here, Galactic Factotum, on Instagram and on Threads, and hopefully sometime soon on YouTube. But he will be on my YouTube for now.
I will. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
See. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into the book. Okay. Well, at least like a brief overview and whatnot. So the first question I had for us was why we decided to read it. And you can answer honestly.
That's funny, because what you're thinking of my honest answer was supposed to be like my joke answer, but it literally is the honest, where you literally said, hey,
yeah,
I'm reading Plagueis right now. Read it so we can do a podcast on it. You have 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. So I've been aware of the novel for a very long time. The cover of the novel has always been a print on my mind, because to me, I think, I wouldn't say that was my first vision of Plagueis, but just like that silhouetted dark is like what I picture, kind of like what we have in the background right here of our except obviously blue in the novel. But yeah, I've always been told so I've always been told, you should read this if you are a fan of the dark side, if you're a fan of Palpatine and all this stuff. It's like, it's a really great insight, and I really have no reason for not reading it. I just never got around to it until you came along and pretty much said, hey, we're doing this.
Yes.
And I'm glad we did. But it was good. It was a good read. I love the sound effects and the voices and all the acting going on.
Yes, I definitely enjoyed the sound effects to keep me focused, because even I had it on my phone to read along, and I would like zone off like as I'm listening to it, but then I would hear like shooting or blasters,
and you're like,
whatever.
Oh shit, what's going on?
I'm like, something's happening. And I would have to go back and reread, and I just ADHD whatnot, so I couldn't really focus at times. But it's okay, because I have like 3 pages of notes, which means I actually paid attention, and this isn't even the notes for the video. So
I keep mine very, very brief.
Yeah,
this is literally up to here is what I have.
Well,
and then my plug-in notes of like IG and where I am, because I was like, I'm gonna forget what I do.
I'm not around. I'm just a ghost. I'm an essence. It just floats around.
Exactly.
Yes, and because it was on your reading list, as was it on mine. So yes, and I also want to get more into Legends, which you already have a lot more knowledge than I do on that. And also when Acolyte, don't shrug, yes you do. I go to you with questions all the time. All the time.
And the second you did, I'm usually on my phone like, wait, what was that again? Okay, yeah, that was that. It's mostly for clarification. I know it, but sometimes I have a hard time just storing certain amounts of information.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Oh, and the third point as to why I wanted to read the book was because after the Acolyte, which, obviously there's a lot of tension around that subject, but when it came out, I was watching other people's podcasts and YouTube videos, and like They were speculating about certain things, and I was just like, how do they have so much knowledge? And then they would like reference like the Plagueis book, because there was a lot of influence from the Plagueis novel, specifically, like I think I would say in the first half. That was where we see it sprinkled in or maybe the second half. I don't know. What would you say has the most influence from the Plagueis novel in Acolyte? Like what portion of it? Would you say the first half or second half? Probably second half.
I would say the second half because it delves more into like why everything is the way it is, whereas the first half is like, okay, it's like a whodunit. Like, okay, we got to figure out who did it. Yeah. Who did this? Who did that? Then we get there, and then it starts into like the whole like learning who the stranger is and all that, which I mean a lot of people won't like hearing, but yeah, when I was reading this, that was like the first thing that came to mind. It has a kind of like eerie kind, especially knowing who these characters are, or at least Palpatine. So it's like know what's going to happen eventually. So it's like it's like that you're waiting for like the ball to drop kind of thing. Yeah. So second half has a lot of influence from this book, and then just like I think reading the novels helps speculating with any future projects or shows, because you have that like background knowledge of like, oh, I saw like they said they referenced Baldemic. I don't know how to say the name. Baldemic. Yes. Trying not to look at my phone, but I believe so. I hope we're not butchering that.
It's the island that they're on in the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So they reference that island, and then the cortosis that we see that deflects and like basically paralyzes the lightsabers. Like, what would you call it when it's not ignites, but like the opposite of that?
Retracts. Powers off, shuts off.
Powers off. Yeah, when it powers off the lightsabers.
It's like short circuits them in a way.
Yeah, and then of course the biggest reveal is the cameo from Plagueis, or of Plagueis in Acolyte. So
which went very well.
Yeah.
But we don't have to get into that.
But yeah, so I think this book definitely gives some insight, a lot of insight. Like, and then I was just thinking when I was reading this book, I was thinking about the prequels, especially episode 1, because this is like, it's not like right before it the entire time, but like, towards the end is close to the events of the Phantom Menace.
I wasn't expecting at all. When I started realizing like familiar territory, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh, they're actually getting into exactly leading up to it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty damn cool.
Basically episode 0, right? Episodes like Acolyte could be like -1, and then this is like episode 0, or maybe reversed. I don't know, somewhere around there. I know this isn't like canon. It's just like legends. It maybe they're just together. They're meshed together. But
it still works, even though it's not canon anymore.
Yeah. No, well, a lot of this book, like, if it's not canon, it still feels very like in the timeline. Like it fits really well into the timeline, even though it's not canon. Like there's a couple things at the end with Tales being out, Tales of the Jedi being out. Like it contradicts like what's going on, like the Count Dooku episodes, like towards when he turns to the dark side and whatnot. But for the majority, I would say like 90% of the book is pretty within what's in canon right now. So yeah, it was really, like you said, it was really interesting to be like, oh, I realized like where they're at or who they're talking to or what they're referencing.
It took me a second the first time when I realized like the time jump, because I did not realize at first that this expands over like multiple decades. So that's when they started naming characters. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? So I had to like kind of go back a little. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it does time jump for the sake of not Plagueis, Palpatine story, which I kind of feel like this novel is titled Plagueis, but like the first half of it is of Plagueis, and I think the second half of it is of Palpatine and like him growing in the dark side. And is there a novel specifically of Palpatine, or was this it? Like it was like half Palpatine, half Plagueis for this book?
I don't want to give,
and then that's all we were getting.
I don't want to give the wrong answer, because as far as I know, this is like when people reference Palpatine, I'm like, oh, if you want to know more about him or get a bigger
This is the
insight,
book.
read Plagueis.
Okay. So then, this is the Plagueis/Palpatine novel, not just the Plagueis novel, I would say. But yeah, so I want to read more legends, and that was why I wanted to read this book. It helps with speculating, and it was on my list anyways, and then I wanted to talk with you about it. So then I was like,
force its way onto my list.
Get this book now! And then, that's our friendship. My friendship is, hey, let's do this thing. And then you're like, I guess. And then
it works out.
We do the thing. Yeah, and it works out. But yeah, of course, I appreciate you reading the book because you could have been like, absolutely not. But yeah, I'm glad that you read it with me. It's been fun. I like the it was a good journey. Third question that I have for us, how we felt going into the book, because I know, it wasn't necessarily something that you were anticipating doing, but before you got to reading it and before or after my being like, read this book, how did you actually feel about getting into the book?
Going into it, I was honestly just like a little iffy because, like I'm a huge light sider, Jedi side. So I was like, selfishly, I was like, do I want to read more into it? Or this is like, I'd rather read something about like Qui-Gon. I'd rather read something about someone else. But then I started reading like little tidbits where people were like, oh, it kind of delves into this and this and this and that about like specific things of the dark side or specific character traits of Plagueis or Palpatine. And so I was like, oh, well, that actually does sound kind of interesting. So then when I started listening to it, reading it, I didn't want it to stop. It was like interesting, like immediate, like it kicks off immediate, like in the first chapter. So it's like it grips you right away.
Yeah, the first two chapters I wasn't expecting to be that intriguing. I wasn't expecting for it to start off with Plagueis immediately murdering his master. Like I was expecting a little bit. I was expecting the information that we get in the middle section of the first beginning of the book to be like the beginning of the book, like basically background about Plagueis and like his upbringing and his childhood, and then leading up to his relationship with Tenebris, and then leading to Palpatine.
I thought it was gonna be a slow burn.
Yeah, but it was flip-flopped, which is fine. It got my attention, and that's probably the purpose of it, is to immediately grab the reader's attention. So kudos to the author for that. Very very well done.
That was Star Wars.
You're like, but yeah, it was super intriguing initially. So before we get into like our favorite moments, key moments of the book, and we'll just hop around, this isn't going to be a very detailed breakdown of the book, because one, I just wanted to touch base on like how it affected our Star Wars, like, because everyone has their own Star Wars, and I just wanted to see like that impact of the book on us, and then as well as there are several videos that have a more comprehensive breakdown of this book. So if that's something that you wanted, go to those creators. This video will be just a general rundown. All right, so I'm gonna do my own. So this is, I didn't even get it from like the online webs, whatnot. I didn't get it from the webs. I was just writing down my brief synopsis of how I would describe it to like if I was talking to you. So that's another reason why I didn't want to keep this video like so. I didn't want to make it super detailed because I just want it to be something that's digestible, like for someone like us who has low attention spans and just like get to the point. So my brief synopsis, and it's gonna sound super odd, but here we go. I wrote, it starts off with Plagueis having just murdered his master and goes back home to the Munes and focuses on his banking influences is how I would describe it. I wouldn't describe it as political influences, and we'll get into that, but focuses on his banking influences and the overall Sith goal for takeover of the galaxy. And then he finds/runs into Palpatine because it wasn't something that he was seeking. So that's why I put runs into Palpatine.
Right.
He then grooms Palpatine, and because he didn't take him initially as his apprentice, he grooms him. And then Palpatine becomes his apprentice, and then Palpatine continues to grow in the dark side, and they continue to influence the galaxy for, again, the overall goal of the Sith to take over. And then Palpatine also continues to grow in the Senate/politics. And then at the very end, we all know how this ends. Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? So that is my very basic, like, kindergartner synopsis of the book. And I hope that was helpful. So, like, you know, like, we're going to be spoiling things in the book, but maybe I could, you know, if maybe that synopsis, if you just like pause the video right here and now and you're like, oh, that does seem interesting, I want to go read the book. Hopefully that was because of my very lovely
So stop watching this video.
Yeah, and
Pause
go
it,
read the
it.
book.
Yeah.
Because it was obviously
and
super
don't come
moving.
back here until you're done.
Exactly. Revisit it later. So yes, that was my synopsis. And so the next portion that I have for us is talking about our key/favorite moments, which will involve quotes and whatnot. So let's start with you. What were some of your favorite moments from this book? Because there are 30 chapters of the book. So name just a couple and we'll go from there.
I jotted down the ones that just like stuck to me the most. Obviously, like you said, there is a lot because there are a lot of chapters. Granted, not super long chapters. It's not a very, very long novel. It's just broken down that way. My little cheat sheet. So
your 5 bullet
my 5 bullet points that I could expand into 30 somehow.
Yeah.
So there was one. I have like 3 of them, and one is literally the beginning of when Plagueis is like asking the crew of the ship to like take him and everything, and he just ends up butchering every single one of them. So you kind of get the idea of what kind of person Plagueis is, because you start thinking like, if they cooperated him, would he have gone with it? Would he still have killed them? Would he, you know, is it these little tiny things that kind of like just start clicking his mind to like be this person, or has he just always been this person? And so I just love that, like right off the bat, it just like he just starts murdering people. So you're like, okay, this is who he is. He's just an evil person who just seeks the absolute most, I guess would be a way to say it. I also really liked, I shouldn't say like, because it's kind of a weird thing to like, but when Palpatine slaughters like the grand delegation, just for attempting to assassinate him, for them attempting to assassinate Plagueis, and Palpatine just like wipes them out in a way, and that really stood out to me, because I was very like reminiscent of what eventually happens to Anakin. He lashes out in defense for what he's corrupted into believing, and therefore just goes on this giant tangent. Like, so that's what kind of gripped me, was I got a lot of Anakin from Revenge of the Sith vibes with Palpatine, because Palpatine was in his position. He was the student and all that.
Right.
So you started seeing his I want to say downfall, because, you know, Palpatine is who he is and what he's always been. So there wasn't really like a good boy turning bad type moment. It's just, you know, he was on par with Plagueis of wanting the absolute most, you know, the best everything by any means necessary, which, you know, and then the last one was more Palpatine killing Plagueis, or like that whole thing. Because I kind of felt like Palpatine was kind of like he intended for everything that happens. Like he intended for it all to happen. Like Plagueis got what he wanted because of Palpatine. Like even after all this, Palpatine was kind of, in a way, a puppet master of like ensuring that this happens, this happens, this happens. Also, he can gather everything that he wants from Plagueis and then just cut him out of it, and therefore leaving Palpatine to be the one and only reigning thing. um, yeah, that's about as much as I can butcher that description of those specific things, but
That's okay. Yeah,
yeah.
we'll start from the because I don't wanna lose track of my thoughts either, so based off of what you were saying. So,
Right.
the most recent one that you just talked about was how Plagueis or no, Palpatine was the puppet master.
Mhm.
Eventually, it became him being the puppet master, and I
Yes.
think that's, like, a direct reflection of the not progress, but the sequence of the book is we have Plagueis at the very forefront of
Mhm.
the inner workings of making the Sith, be in a position to be able to take over the galaxy. And
Right.
then he gets Palpatine, and then Palpatine continues to grow. And as Palpatine grows, Plagueis doesn't necessarily, I mean, he kind of does get weaker, but we
Mhm.
also see that he gets stronger in the Force, even though physically he is weaker. So
Yeah.
as Plagueis gets weaker, Palpatine grows stronger. And he also, again, like you mentioned, he starts putting the pieces in place for Sith takeover. However, we learned very early that Palpatine does not like listening to anyone, taking orders from
Mhm.
anyone. He needs to be the one in charge. Um, and so, yeah, he puts himself in that position to be the one in charge. And then,
Mhm.
of course, he sees the opportunity to kill Plagueis, which I thought was really interesting because I wasn't expecting it to be like that. Like, I didn't read a whole lot on the book going into it. I just knew that this was, about Plagueis and Palpatine. And then like that's pretty much it. And then I see like snips and pieces because of the acolyte. But before that, I had really no knowledge. And so the way that Palpatine kills Plagueis, it wasn't calculated. Like maybe the events leading up could be spun as calculated,
Mhm.
but him killing him, it was just an opportunity that he saw. Like he
Yeah.
was literally just rehearsing his lines to become chancellor,
Yeah.
and then he just keeps like looking at his master and is like, and then the black shroud of the force, of the dark side of the force, is
Yeah.
like, kill him now, and then he does it. And so that was just wild to me that it wasn't something like, it's always something at the back of his mind, because
Mhm.
that's how the rule of two works, right? Like apprentice usually kills the
Yeah.
master, and then they get an apprentice, and that's just the
Mhm.
type of lineage that they've got going because of the Sith, just like their
Right.
general nature. Um, so I thought that was just really interesting. I was not expecting for it
Mhm.
not to be planned because Palpatine is so calculated.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like kind of like him thinking in the moment, just like taking things as the moment, but like on the flip
Yeah.
side of being good, right? Like flip
Yeah,
side of
yeah.
what Qui-Gon tells Anakin. So
Mhm.
that was really interesting too. The second thing that you talked about was like, speaking of parallels, like that was one that I was thinking throughout the book. Like there were certain moments of lessons that Plagueis was giving Palpatine, or that Palpatine was learning on his own, where
Mhm.
I was like, this is so interesting because it's like the exact opposite of what the Jedi would say. Like in this instance, the Jedi are applying it for good, and the Sith are applying it for evil.
Mhm.
And it reminded me, and people are probably gonna hate it, but like it reminds me of the Acolyte, where Chimera is talking about how like it's all just semantics. Like it's all just, it's just
Yeah.
how what your perspective is.
Right, right, right. I mean, whether people like the show or not, it's the fact that they touch on these things that is familiar with people from a beloved novel.
Mhm.
But, of course, because it's attached to certain projects, they're gonna be like, "Oh, it's nothing," or whatever. But it's like, no, it's I
Yeah.
I love the idea that they're taking influence from these sorts of novels, even though they're not technically canon,
Right.
but yet they're still pulling from it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I agree with the whole. Absolutely felt the acolyte while
Yeah.
reading this. Yeah,
Yeah, and, like, I'm sure it was the reverse for other people, like, who had read this novel first and then went
and then
into
watch it.
watching The Acolyte,
Mhm.
but that's just how our journey is.
Yeah.
But you were talking about Palpatine and seeing parallels of, like, him and then what Anakin needed to do in Revenge of the Sith, and I
Mhm.
also saw that. Also, super was not expecting this at all, but Palpatine, like, loves, like, speeders and, like, racing and
Yeah.
whatnot, and so, like, I thought that was really ironic because I was just thinking to myself, like, I wonder if, like, Anakin and him ever just like sat there and like chatted about like the recent like Boonta Eve races or whatever, you
Yeah.
know, like that was just really
Looking
interesting
at
to
the
me. Or like,
magazines and catalogs of the new speeders
yeah,
coming out.
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I love that 3400 whatever speeder, you know.
Debating
Um,
color schemes and everything.
yeah. Oh, I don't know if they're called mufflers in the Star Wars universe, but I love that muffler.
This is dope. I love this. He could have converted all that money into something else, but obviously he loves this car and it's well sorted.
Well, we're gonna go with mufflers, whether it is or isn't.
So yeah, that was really interesting to me to find out about Palpatine. But like you're right, like some of the because I was also thinking I haven't read a whole lot of the Darth Vader comics, but I
Mhm.
think there's like some insight as to like Palpatine like made Vader's armor specifically just enough, like made it just well enough to keep him alive, but it could have been made better for him not to be in so much pain. I don't know
Right.
where I've read that or heard that, but I know that that's a thing. Um,
I was gonna say no. I mean, it would make sense because Palpatine doesn't want anyone to be higher than he is.
right. But
Yeah.
also, like, that's just, like, the Sith stuff, like, Plagueis, you know, had Palpatine basically freeze to death in, like, one of his lessons and one of his very
Mhm.
beginning lessons, and, like, it's all about pain, and, like, these lessons that the Sith put their apprentices through, like, we also see it in, Tales of the Empire, like,
Mhm.
how the Inquisitors put them against each other, and it's survival of the fittest, like,
Right.
give in to the pain, like, use that pain for power, and that was also interesting to see because he does it to Anakin, right?
Yeah.
He puts him in positions of pain, and then Anakin uses those pain points to draw his power from, and that's the how the Sith draw their power, but there's also different ways, like, Plagueis also because you were talking in the beginning about how he was just, like, slaughtering people, and
Mhm.
I kinda saw it as, like, Plagueis is I feel like Plagueis is way more calculated than Palpatine, at least in the beginning,
Mhm.
um, because, like, he doesn't kill just to kill, like, he kills in a calculated way, like, it has to be meaningful, and,
Yeah.
like, he negotiates with them first, like, he's like, "Don't do this," like, This is all you need to know about me as long as you get me from point A to B, like, we're Gucci," like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they didn't, and so that's why he retaliated,
Mhm.
um, so yeah, I thought he was really calculated in that, and I think he kills for purpose, not just to kill, like, power is there's, like, a quote, I think I wrote it down, let me see. Gosh, I'm not gonna be able to find it yes. I think that was your 3 points, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Parallels to Revenge of the Sith, the very end of the novel, and
And then the very beginning. So pretty much the
when
the beginning, middle, and end. Yeah.
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 Okay. So I think we covered some of mine, but I think I have a little bit more,
Sure.
okay, so a couple of my favorite moments, I like we talked about the very beginning, like the first two chapters where it just starts off with um Plagueis killing Tenebris, and like their interaction, like I felt like it was really respectful, but like also
Mhm.
there was a lot of rage in their interaction. I
Yeah.
don't know if that describes that well. Um and then it was really interesting to see Plagueis on the ship, as he's escaping off of Baldemic and whatnot, um, how he was just, like, utilizing the Force to read the midichlorian count, of the different beings or species
Mhm.
on that ship, and he said something like, "The Sith don't use the archaic or, like, uncivilized way of, like, physically
Mhm.
testing, like, drawing blood or whatever."
Inconceivable!
And I thought that was really funny because he's like, "Oh, we have so much more, like, honor and civility for being able to
Yeah.
utilize the Force to read that." So
Mhm.
I thought that was really interesting. Um, I also it was really interesting to hear how he was, like, sustaining his body and his life force, like, just him being immune and, like, his biological features, and then him utilizing the Force to be able to sustain himself with, like, having endured some injuries.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I loved getting more background on Plagueis, like his upbringing and
Yeah.
like where he comes from, and then also Munes, like the species as a whole, like their traditions. Um, because he was basically he was like a bargaining chip for Tenebris, right? If
Mhm.
I can remember that correctly. Let me go back to my notes.
That sounds right.
Yeah, so Plagueis's father wanted to get into the upper echelon of the banking clan,
Mhm.
and he worked with Rugus Gnome, which is like the civilian name for Darth Tenebris.
Mhm.
Um, and then he was supposed to be given to Darth Tenebris in exchange for Tenebris getting his father into like the higher rankings. And the way that they conceived Plagueis was they made sure to make sure like their midichlorian counts were high, like that the partner was also had high midichlorian counts, so that way
Mhm.
he would be, you know, force sensitive. So I thought that
Right.
was interesting, like science from the beginning, everyone is just pawns like for, your wants, desires,
Yeah.
whatever. Um and then I also really enjoyed seeing his interactions with the crime syndicates. Like I really like those aspects that we see, those few episodes that we get in Clone Wars. And then where else do we see it? I think a little bit in Bad Batch 2,
Mhm.
maybe, if I can remember correctly. But I really like that stuff. And so seeing his like small influences with his finances with the syndicates and placing them in particular planets or
Mhm.
areas of the galaxy to make sure he had leverage over them so that way he could control the outcomes of certain situations. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't in politics, but politics and crime and what's the word that I'm looking for? Corruption. Yes, like these
Yeah.
gang syndicates, the corruption, he's able to utilize that because it's all a part of politics. So that was really, really cool. And then also
Yeah.
the fact that he has like an annual like gang get together and it's like, all right, you're good, you're on my good list, you're on my good list, you're on my naughty list, prepare to die. You're on my good list. So that was really fun to see. But something that will permanently stick with me forever is the scene on Sereno. Am I saying that right? Dooku's home planet, Sereno? Sereno?
I can't remember the last time I heard it spoken in person, so I'm gonna say yes.
Yes. Count Dooku's home planet.
Okay.
When Plagueis goes there, I forget why he's there.
Mhm.
I don't remember, but he's there and the Jedi are there. And it's Qui-Gon,
Mhm.
Count Dooku, Sifo Dyas, and Master, well, she's not a master, but Jocasta Nu.
Yeah.
They're all
They're all
there.
there. Yeah.
And they have an entire conversation about the corruption in the galaxy and like the
Yeah.
Jedi being basically overthrown. And Plagueis is basically like fishing for like information to understand where the Jedi are at, like in their philosophy and they're just like withstanding in the Republic and things like that. And then also, it's just like whenever he encounters a Jedi or any other force sensitive being, it's like a challenge for him to
Mhm.
be like, all right, how well can I conceal myself, in these situations? And it's just wild to me that Qui Gon had an entire, he like not fought Plagueis, but like verbally, like mind to mind fought
Yeah.
them like in a conversation. Like
Mhm.
Qui-Gon was like, I don't agree with you. And Plagueis was like, well, let's just agree to disagree. And Qui-Gon was like, no, I don't agree with you. Like that was really
Yeah.
fun to see. Um, and then the fact that Count Dooku talks to like I'm just thinking about the prequels and even in Clone Wars and knowing that, like,
They've
these
interacted with
Jedi had,
Vegas.
yeah,
Yeah.
interacted with him. I'm, like, getting so excited that I'm moving my camera. But, yeah, that was
Mhm.
that was so good. A couple of other small points that I wanted to mention about it was, Plagueis, like doing like a trial and error thing
Mhm.
basically with the Kaminoans with the cloning and like what subjects would work best to
Right.
be able to be this army. And they were actually thinking about, or Plagueis was actually thinking or planning to use an army against the Jedi, which they technically did, but instead the clones were to work alongside the Jedi, which was actually Palpatine's idea to have the clones work alongside the Jedi and then turn on them.
Flip, yeah.
Um, yeah. So that was really interesting to see.
Mhm.
And then also what was interesting was that Plagueis never, so I think it's wild that Plagueis was attempting like as it gets closer to the events of the Phantom Menace,
Mhm.
Plagueis attempts to not confront, but like interact with Anakin. And
Yeah.
he keeps missing him. He tries, like, 2 or 3 times, and he
Yeah.
keeps missing him, and then towards the end, like, right before I think it's after or right before Palpatine g yeah, before Palpatine
Mhm.
gets placed as Chancellor, he observes Qui-Gon and Anakin
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
talking to each other, and that was just, like, super interesting to me, the fact that he was on
Yeah.
Coruscant when the events of the Phantom Menace
Mhm.
were happening, even when Darth Maul and Palpatine were talking to each other on the balcony, like, he was listening in, and
Yeah.
he heard Palpatine call Darth Maul his apprentice, and he was like,
Mhm.
"I have, like, this rage building up inside me." So,
Jealousy.
yeah, like, that was just crazy to me, and, like, this whole time, Plagueis wanted a partner in it
Mhm.
all, and Palpatine was like, "No, like, there is a larger plan at like, that I have for myself, and
Mhm.
I'm not gonna just be your partner." But Plagueis this whole time was like, "Alright, I found my equal, we're just gonna continue with the flow of the events
Yeah.
to get ourselves in power, and then we'll just take over and rule
Mhm.
forever and, like, keep ourselves alive forever using the dark sciences."
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I I touched on a couple of key moments, but the next question is what are some of the key moments that or at least in your head or, like, in your opinion, what are key moments that you think people need to be aware or draw from this book?
I mean, some of the key moments are, like, some of the quotes that I had saved, which I think sort of, shows not just why Palpatine is the way he is, but also just the way the Sith in general view things. Like, where is the, it's like I said earlier, it's like the quote of "Remember why the Sith are more powerful than the Jedi." This is, Plagueis telling Sidious. He says, "Because we're not afraid of feel, we embrace the spectrum of emotions from the heights of transcendent joy to the depths of hatred and despair. Fearless, we welcome whatever path the dark side sets us on and whatever destiny it lays out for us." So it's very like, they're not trying to suppress anything. They're not trying to hold anything back. It's like, if this is how we're meant to feel, this is why we do what we do, which is why for people who are dark side sympathizers are like, what they're doing is correct. It's like
Mhm,
any evil character in like a film or TV show where it's like, to us it's like, oh, you're just pure evil in every single way, but
mhm,
to them
mhm,
it's the right way. And
mhm.
this whole, so it made me question a little, not question and sort of like go against everything that I thought about the Force, but it is awesome to see like the insight of like why the Sith are the way they are and why people would actually agree with what they have to say. So I think if you're a huge fan of like the Sith and the dark side and you root for all that, I would say like this book literally like shows you how they use the Force, how they view the Force, how the Force helps and guides them to do what they're doing, even if it's like the worst thing in the galaxy that they do. It's like, to them it's like, no, this is the right way because this is what it's telling me to do. This is my place. This is what I'm supposed to do because this is where the Force is guiding me, you know.
Yeah,
So I think the biggest takeaway is like just an insight on the Force in the from the view of, the Sith, the baddies, the heck
yeah.
kids nowadays
Well,
call them.
that's what, that's what makes, like, the most I don't wanna say liked villains, but maybe liked villains or, like, it's what makes the best villains is
When you
when
can
you can
see their
relate,
point of view, yeah.
when you can understand,
Mhm.
um and then that goes hand in hand with the quote that Anakin says, it's like, "Well, from my point of
Point
view,
of
the
view of the Jedi.
Jedi
Yeah,
are"
exactly. It's
Yeah,
all it's all subjective. It's all depends on which side you're on or how you look at it. Could be
yeah,
right, could be wrong.
yeah, so I like that that you got that quote, and it also
Mhm.
kinda goes hand in hand with the Acolyte too, with what again, what Chimera was telling, um, Osha
Mhm.
when she was like, "I would never, like, turn to the dark side," and it's all like, "Well, I you say that now, but, you know,
Yeah.
when you're placed in those situations, it's all about perspective."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because and the reason why that is, I feel like, my opinion is it's a balance. Like throughout this book, we see it. Like Plagueis is constantly referring to the Force, like constantly balancing itself out, and it's like the good and evil, they have to coexist. You can't have one without the other.
Right, right.
And we all struggle, with our own dark side, but it's choosing the light. And again, it's all about like perspective, or it's subjective. And
Yeah.
so we really have to like have that internal battle with ourselves and be like, no, this is what is just. It's selfish for me to just give in to whatever selfish feelings that I'm having at that moment. So
Right.
I like that. I like that quote a lot. Do you have any other key moments or any other quotes that go into that key moment that you might have listed?
I think this one goes into it because it's the second one I have saved, and I think they kind of go in where it says, "To say that the Force works in mysterious ways is to admit one's ignorance. For any mystery can be solved through the application of knowledge and unrelenting effort."
Mm,
So it's kind of like the people who just like kind of dismiss it as like, "Oh well, it's just the way of the Force." It's like, yeah, but that's just kind of
mm,
it is a kind of ignorance because um it's like, you should be like, why is it that way? Why is this happening? Why is this, seeking that knowledge does
mhm,
make you more, maybe it makes you more in tuned into it, or it makes you more
mhm.
powerful in a way because you're starting to understand why it is. And maybe you'll start to see the pattern that it forms. And then, okay, well, maybe that's my destiny. Uh, so I really love that it kind of, like I said, it made me view the Force in a different way from the perspective of the villains in
Right,
the story. So it's like, okay, I
right.
understand now why they are the way they are. It makes sense. Granted, it leads
Yeah,
to very evil things, but
yeah,
they have a purpose. They're not just bad for the sake of, oh, we need a villain. Okay, this person. It's like there's a reason why they are the way they are, and why
yeah.
it affects everyone and everything that they cross, whether they did something to them directly or indirectly. It's like it's all being affected by their way of thinking.
Yeah, I think I had something similar. You're talking about that quote, and I feel like it kind of goes hand in hand with like not only are they trying to research and whatnot, and then like quite. I don't know if you've read Master and Apprentice. Have you read Master and
I
Apprentice?
only got through the first 2 or 3 chapters.
Okay.
And then
Well,
yeah.
yeah. So Qui-Gon, because you haven't read it, but like this is just like a brief insight into it.
Mhm.
But Qui-Gon is constantly seeking knowledge, and like he's very obsessed with like the prophecies and like the most like, no, I don't want to say celestial prophecies, but
Mhm.
like the really big overall arching galaxy prophecies that they've got somewhere in their archives. Like that was his intrigue, and he would always send Obi-Wan to like collect data basically, or like
Mhm.
read specific like books and whatnot like this to provide the
Right.
information to Qui-Gon. And like he was constantly seeking like more from the Force, right? Like to understand it better. And I feel
Mhm.
like the rest of the Jedi were just kind of content with
Yeah.
like the level of power or knowledge that they had. But like trying to seek knowledge and power, I don't think is always bad. Like we've been
No, it's
talking
not.
about, like it's always it's just it's subjective.
Yeah,
Um
exactly.
it's how you wield it, how you wield that knowledge. And like the whole tone of this book was very detached, and I think
Mhm.
that's the whole point of it. Like it was a bit hard for me, honestly, and this is one of my notes, is that it was a bit hard for me to get through at some points because it was so politically heavy, and
Mhm.
I would be like, I'm lost, like, I have no idea, like, what policies they're talking about, what
Right.
realms they're talking about, what people they're referring to, like,
Mhm.
whatever it is, I would get lost because it was really politically heavy and so detached, and so it kind of reminded me of Andor too,
Mhm.
because I had a hard time getting into Andor, like, for the first half of it and until it picked up because it was so politically heavy. But
Mhm.
also that's kind of like the intrigue of this book is, like, seeing the inner workings of the politics.
Yeah.
But all that to say is that Plagueis was super calculated and very focused on Sith sciences and whatnot, and his ultimate goal was just to stay in power forever, right? Like, that is
Yeah.
just the constant
Yeah.
cycle of the Sith,
Mhm.
but it throws off the balance of the Force, so but he says one wait, let me see, is that the one? No. No, no,
I
no,
don't
no.
know.
He said, "The goal is to extend my life indefinitely, to conquer death." Like, that's his just main focus,
Yeah.
and then, Oh, and then you were talking about the study of the Force, and Plagueis also is telling Palpatine at one point, one defines the Sith as an ancient sect devoted to the study of the Force, similar to the Jedi, but guided by different principles. And that kind of just, surmises also
Just
the
points of
difference
views.
between them.
Point of
Yeah.
views. Point of views. Yeah.
Points of views.
Points. Viewpoints.
Points of views. Okay. Let me just let me just see if I've got any other, because that goes into the next one with the quotes.
I thought we were on quotes. Are we not on quotes yet?
I mean, we were kind of like in between quotes and like,
because I was like, I
major
used up my
points that we
I used
thought.
up my 2, but I will gladly pull another if we're trying to meet a certain quota with your laundry list.
No, I think that's pretty much it. I do want to kind of talk about your like thoughts on, because we haven't really touched about when Plagueis finds Palpatine and when Palpatine is just given Maul, like he's just wasn't expecting him. So, what were your thoughts when those events happened? When Plagueis first encounters Palpatine, like how he grooms him? How did you feel throughout that read?
It just was very like, I want to say uneasy, just because you bring up the concept or idea of grooming someone, which could be in many different ways. None of the often majority of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, it's not in a good way.
Yeah.
So there was always like that weird underlying of like, of just seeing him just like, okay, so like obviously this is why Palpatine also starts to see certain things, because this guy was just the devil on his left shoulder at such a young age, just feeding him like, this is, and therefore just sort of, turned Palpatine again, because there wasn't that point of turn. So I don't want to say turn, because there wasn't like that click of like, oh, I'm not good anymore, I'm the ultimate villain. But it was just like that's in a way like almost like a slow burn of like, the way Plagueis would speak to him or present him with something. It's in a very like, he's just like spoon feeding him like, yes, take this, take this, take this, take this, this is what you need to know. So it was, I would say it was just like kind of like an uneasy read, because it's just, the inner workings of a madman, of an evil person, just raising this child basically to be what he wanted to be, which was just this ultimate evil, and he succeeded. Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting to see, because I've already read like a couple of snippets and whatnot, like kind of already knew that Palpatine had already been pretty malevolent from the beginning, right? That's the word. Evil, malevolent. Yeah, right?
One of those.
No, this is truth. This is
No, I'm saying like, yeah, that I just don't ask me, because I don't want to be like, yeah, you're right, and then have this whole thing be pretty sure it's,
malevolence. That's not
yeah,
malevolent. Malevolence. State of being malevolence. State of being spiteful. State of being hostile, bitter, malignant. The quality of causing or wanting the cause of harm, to cause harm or evil. Yes. He was always had a state of malevolence, okay? I knew it was the word. But he's like, I felt like there was always this like whisper of like basically his own voice, but like the really, really evil voice, like, do it. Do it. Do it.
Do it. Do it now.
Like, do that evil thing. And
that's
then like
all he heard in his whole life. It's just
yeah. That's what I feel like he did, because like I think he would have to like, the way that I interpreted it is he'd have to like stop himself, like he'd get kind of consumed in his thoughts when certain situations would happen, and he would like have to bring himself back to reality. And what really gets me is that like that seed has always been there, and Plagueis felt that, he sensed that, and all he did was encouraged it, which is basically what Palpatine did to Anakin, right?
Yeah.
Like there was that seed of anger and hatred already there. While like caused by a different reason, Palpatine was just naturally evil. Like there
Yeah.
wasn't anything to instigate this evilness.
Right.
But like that's what Plagueis did, was like, yeah, like what you're feeling is valid. I'm sure you want to do this, this, and this.
Mhm.
And then Palpatine's like, you're right. I do want to do this, this,
Yeah.
and this, right? And so like that was his way of encouraging Palpatine further to the dark side to make him his apprentice. And then what surprised me was Palpatine slaughtering his entire family because his dad told him no. He was like,
Yeah.
no, like stop associating yourself with Higo Damask, which is his civilian name.
Yeah.
And Palpatine's like, don't tell me what to do. And then he just slaughters his entire family
Yeah.
as, they're on the ship. And even then, like Palpatine, I think he says something like, I didn't feel guilty, but I was just like shocked at what I had done. Like he just had like
Yeah.
lost sight of himself in the moment, but he didn't feel any guilt. But he was just like, "Oh my gosh, like where do I go from here?" But it wasn't
Just
guilt that he had killed his family.
like Anakin.
And then yeah, and then like in a certain point also he was like, "This is what I've always wanted to do, and I finally did it."
Mhm.
So that was pretty wild to me. And then just seeing like it was just really fun to read like Plagueis's again calculated words to Palpatine to encourage him to give in to his
Like,
already
yeah, Palpatine had no
evil.
choice of going any other way but the way of
Yeah.
evil. It's like you said, Palpatine always had it in him. Plagueis just literally just unlocked it and just
Yeah. It was
be
like,
free.
yes, do it.
Exactly like that.
That's how I picture it in my
He just
head.
always just
Okay.
lingering over his shoulder, like, "Hey, just do it. Come on."
Why is it in like a New Jersey, New York
I
voice?
don't know. I just assume he's like that. He wasn't born in a swamp, so he's not like, he's not like a bayou person. He's,
Is that a pipe? How would a Bayou person sound?
that's we'll have to come back to that one. Like Yoda is definitely he lives in a swamp, so he's definitely adapted to the bayou lifestyle. But that's a whole other we'll get into that some other time.
Yeah, we'll have a whole video about different accents throughout the galaxy, I guess.
If we applied it to real life America, how would it
Yeah.
work? Oh, Dagobah should be Louisiana. It'd be New Orleans. Yeah, that's a whole other 5-hour endeavor. We'll get to that.
All right, moving on.
Yes.
My other event that I wanted you to speak on was how Palpatine acquires Maul.
It
Like,
was
what did you
not
think
at
about that?
all what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be like Palpatine was somewhere and he saw like very cliche, but it would make sense. Maybe he saw like a fight going on, or like people are just watching two people fighting, and one of them happened to be Maul. And maybe during that, Palpatine would sense something in Maul as to why he's such a brawly, like, I'm gonna kill the next person who comes in here. But it wasn't. It was just, you know, it was very, I wouldn't say anticlimactic, but I guess maybe because I built something up that was completely different in my head, but it wasn't like disappointing. It wasn't like, oh, this just happened. It was just very like, oh, it just wasn't at all. So it kind of threw me off a little. I had to like go back and like re-listen to like that part because I was like in my head, I was like, oh, that's it. That's something
Mm,
about okay. Like so
yeah.
it wasn't like a grand, like, oh, like here's Maul, being mentioned in the book or anything. It was just like here you go.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
very I kind of liked that it wasn't like, oh, he found him somewhere in the darkest pits of God knows where and pulled this warrior out and was like, you're with me now type thing. Like it wasn't that at all,
Yeah.
which I found I enjoyed it because it was not at all what I was thinking. It kind of exceeded my expectations in a good way.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of ironic, like, 'cause how you were saying he didn't find him, like, crawling his way out of, like, the
Hell.
deepest, darkest places of the
Yeah.
galaxy, yeah, because I think it just goes hand in hand with how Plagueis falls upon, Palpatine,
Yeah.
and also how Palpatine falls upon Anakin, like, they had no knowledge of Anakin until literally right before or the events of the Phantom Menace were happening. So it's all just by happenstance.
Mhm.
I didn't have like a specific like headcanon for Maul. I always assumed that like something like he was just treated really, really terribly by the Dathomiri Night Sisters or whatnot, and
And he
then
found
Palpatine like
comfort.
rescues him.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like found comfort in Palpatine, and that's how they had their partnership. But like
Yeah.
but that's not at all how it happened. In fact, when I was reading it, it reminded me of the Bad Batch, like
Mhm.
how they have their subjects, like because they were trying to do clones and whatnot, and how
Mhm.
they just have them in a room, like isolated, doing the same things over and over.
Yeah.
Except this was just influenced by Sith like guidance or Sith teaching. So like Maul was just stranded on a planet with like a couple of robots and like told to, you know, train and do whatever just
Mhm.
to ultimately become a fighting or like a weapon
Yeah.
for Palpatine and Plagueis's overall dominance of the galaxy.
Yeah. Just a second
Um
hand for them. Yeah.
yeah, and so that kind of it made me sad a little bit that like had Maul been raised differently, like I feel like and I'm glad that we got him in the ways that we got him in the Clone Wars and Rebels, because I definitely felt like it was wasted potential because he was so strong in the Force, like such a really great warrior. I'm glad that we got a little bit more because, like in this novel, I just felt like it was a waste of talent.
Mhm.
How Palpatine had him training for hours, days on end in isolation, and him living up to Palpatine's expectations and then, you know, just gets cut in half and just for
Yeah.
like that one big event.
Mhm.
So definitely not was what I was expecting. Really interesting to see that his mom was trying to like rescue him and just gave him to Palpatine.
Mhm.
Um, Hearing how Maul was basically raised just as a test subject
Yeah.
was sad for me. So I was throughout the book, I was just like, is is Maul and Dooku Palpatine's apprentices, or are they just,
That is something that I was also
you
kind
know?
of, yeah. I same. I was literally thinking that just now because you were talking about like apprentice and everything. I was like, oh wait, I was like, wait,
Mhm.
Dooku was technically. So I don't know.
I don't know either. Because like if we're following the events of Tales,
Mhm.
like Plagueis is technically alive when Count Dooku turns to the no, no, he's not.
No, 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 no.
So
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 after Qui-Gon
Maul
passed.
was still alive. Yeah, because Maul was still alive while Plagueis was alive.
Yes.
So I would say Maul was definitely not Palpatine's apprentice, but Dooku is potentially Palpatine's apprentice because when Dooku dies is basically when Anakin becomes his apprentice.
Yes. Theoretically, yes. Pretty much. I mean, I know there's like an official, obviously in Revenge of the Sith, there's like an official, like, you're calling you Darth Vader.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, once Dooku dies, and I wouldn't say that Anakin became his apprentice right then and there because that wasn't
Mhm.
Anakin's intention or anything just
Mhm.
yet.
Mhm.
But now that I think about it, how does that work with both Dooku and Maul?
I don't know. Let us know in the comments. Is Dooku
I forgot about the people in the
actually
comments. Yeah, please, absolutely, please
let
save
us
us.
know in the comments.
They can smell the bacon cooking through the screens of our brain, just crying, trying to be like,
I don't know. I don't know if it's mentioned anywhere, but let us know.
I'm probably gonna have to look into that afterwards, or I could just wait and let people tell me.
Anyways, welcome to our friendship. Yes. So again, I appreciate you reading this book with me. I think we've had some really great discussions here about certain points in this book. Um, Last question, overall rating of the book on a scale of 1 to 10 in comparison to other books you've read, how would you rate this?
I would give it, and this is just me being me, I would give it a 9 out of 10,
Mm,
simply because it was such a speed run. I didn't get to like, oh, let me jot or I think if I had a physical copy, it would have helped me because I could have just highlighted everything that I wanted
yeah.
to know.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't do anything until after I had finished reading it, and I was like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, that happened. So it's very, again, this is all my notes. It's this tiny little thing. That's it. because it was me just being like, shit, what happened? Okay. So I'm pretty sure it's a 10 out of 10 because that's how everyone presented it. And that's also kind of why I was kind of like, oh, maybe it's whatever, because everyone was like, you have to read this book. And now I see why. So realistically, I would give it a 10 out of 10, but I'm only giving it a 9 because there is still so much details. I definitely want to read it again. Like for sure, especially now knowing that it ties directly into Phantom Menace and ties into all these characters that obviously while they made the films, that wasn't in their thought. You know, they weren't making Phantom Menace being like, oh, Plagueis is right there. Plagueis is right outside the door. Like none of that existed, which is why I kind of forgive some of the continuity for some of because none of that was planned out at all. That's what these novels are, to bridge these things, which I love. So I definitely want to reread it again. I would give it a 10 out of 10, even though I just said 9. So one of those two, whichever one you think is better, 9 or 10.
9.5 out of 10. How about that?
There you go. We'll go with that.
A 0.5 for enough room for you to reread. And then
if I just had that extra week.
Yeah, the extra week was the 0.5 of the rating.
Yes, exactly. So you took the 10 away.
I would give it an 8.5 or 9. And the reason why I say that is because, so I love Andor. I cosplay Bix, and I love the representation that we get. It was really heavy in the beginning. Like it was just very, I don't want to say bland, but it was like, all right, where are we going with this? Like initially I was not a huge fan. Like I was like, there are certain aspects of this that I really like, but I'm just like, where is this going? And then the second half of the show really picked up. And so I love Andor, but it's not like my favorite show. My favorite show would be either Tales of the Jedi, because I watched that like almost all the time.
I think that counts as a different category because
I guess because it's not live
action. That has become a comfort show more than anything. Yeah, obviously we both know that.
But yeah, so Andor isn't like my top favorite, but it's up there. And so this novel, I've read other novels, and it's not one that I would put up as the first one, but it's definitely up there. I might just be biased. It might just be me because I love Qui-Gon. And Master and the Apprentice was like really intriguing for me. So that might just be me. And so that Master and Apprentice would be like number 1 for me. This is number 2. And then Brotherhood is somewhere swimming in like the middle because I don't know where to place it because it's also very good. So those 3 are just in the realm of goodness. But yes, so 8.5 or 9 for me, 9.5/10 for you out of 10.
Yes. Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So one more time for the people out there who are listening, I appreciate you all for sticking with us, for sticking with our nonsense. And hopefully this was a fun breakdown of the book and gave you some insight and hopefully got you hyped to read it yourself. Comment below. Do you think that Count Dooku is Palpatine's apprentice, or is he just a dark side user? And again, for the people out there, don't forget to comment, subscribe, and like this video. And Robbie, for the peoples, tell them where they can find you one more time.
On Instagram and Threads. Galactic_factotum is my handle for pretty much everything. Anything that I start doing. I have a TikTok, but it's being weird right now and like not letting me log into it for some reason. It's still there, but I don't know what's going on. I think we talked about this issue the other day about how for some reason we can't log in, but I don't do much on there, and that's mostly because I'm still used to how to make a TikTok. I help people at conventions, like I helped Bella, I helped Jessica, and just the way it happened, I'm just like, oh, there's a lot more work going into these things than I thought. So it's a whole learning curve for me, even though I'm very tech savvy and not TikTok savvy. So I digress. So Instagram and Threads, hopefully YouTube. Maybe I can just link this video and piggyback off yours. Oh, I have a video.
Yeah.
Kinda. And I have a photography page RKH Photography
Mhm.
on Instagram, which is where I mostly, obviously it's a photography page. I'm going to upload my photos there. So that's where I display most of my like cosplay photography or toy photography or just regular everyday photography. Take a drink every time I say photography. So yeah, Instagram, Threads, galactic_factotum, or Instagram RKH Photography if you're interested in seeing my photography.
Yes, you have a
I
website, don't you?
I have a website. I honestly forget that I have a website,
Yeah.
galacticfactotum.com.
Yes.
Where again I just showcase little bio of myself, and each page is dedicated to my friends and cosplayers that I've taken photos for over the years at different conventions. And yeah, galacticfactotum.com. Thank you for reminding me that I have a website that I can.
Yes, you have a website. Yes. So if you guys are in the Southern California area, hit Robbie up so that way you can get your photos taken. He is a great photographer. Just reach out. I assume DM or email if your email is somewhere on your bio. And just ask, about photography and taking your photos. If you do cosplays or even events, if you're doing events, he does events as well.
Even a lot of cosplay, even if you just want photos. Yeah.
So make sure to check out his page, galactic_factotum, for photography, cosplay, and props. You said props? Is that what they're called?
Props, call them? Model building, model making.
Model building. There you go.
All the stuff.
Model making. Yes. So be sure to check him out. Don't forget, again, comment below. Is Count Dooku Palpatine's apprentice, official apprentice? And we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.